All right, welcome into today's show, the Barbecue Live, powered by Hound Hogs BBQ Supply. Make sure to check them out at houndhogsbbqsupply.com. Super excited, joined by a fellow Midwesterner here on the show today, Mr. Paul Buob. He's the pitmaster and owner of SmokinGhost BBQ, based out of Chillicothe, Illinois. For those that don't know, that's in the central part of Illinois. Make sure you check out SmokinGhost and all the cool things that Paul and the team are doing. Their handles at Instagram and Facebook are at SmokinGhost BBQ. One thing to note, it's only one G. So that G is at the end of smoking, and it also is the G for ghost. So Paul, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be aboard.
And our listeners know us at this point that I always like to start with talking about journey. Journey is always a fascinating thing for me. So I will put you on the hot seat here a little bit, Paul, and ask you to educate us about your barbecue journey. How did all this crazy competition barbecue stuff start for you?
It certainly found me. I didn't find it, it found me. It started probably 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in that area. My kids were going through the public school system in Chillicothe, and my son was playing soccer, and the soccer shorts were, they looked like Speedos. And I wasn't real thrilled with that, nor were the parents. And, we were trying to say, hey, let's just go get them the right shorts. And if you don't do it, we'll do it, typical corporate America mind, let's get her done. So I went to the boosters meeting, and one thing led to another, and they kind of put me in the concession stand, which I thought was, here's how we're going to get it done. I think it was punishment for speaking out. But so we ended up in the concession stand, and one thing led to another, and we got in charge of the concession stand. And, we started going through the menu items, like if you're going to focus on a goal, which is to raise money for kids, what's the margin on the ribeye? And the margin was not great. So nobody knew the answer at the beginning, which also told me something. So we went and started doing more of a higher end pork chop, buying it from a local butcher shop, having it tenderized and all that. And then the gentleman there said, you can make a better margin if you tenderize them yourself, and you buy from like Sam's or Walmart, by the case, and then they'll do that, and next thing you know, we're making more money. And we're at a meeting, and this is probably, I don't know, maybe a year in or so, and now people have bought in, because I think we raised a little over $100,000 in the first year and a half. And they're like, there's a better margin on pulled pork than there is even pork chops. Who knows how to do that? And we looked around the room, and I'm as equally qualified as everyone else if nobody else knows how to do it. So that's how it started. That's literally out of a concession stand at Chillicothe High School. Now, the interesting part there is the nickname for the high school. It was called the Chillicothe Gray Ghosts. And so that's, everybody asks, do our products have ghost powder? The answer is no. We really were just a derivative of the high school mascot, the Gray Ghost. So we became the Smoking Ghost. If it were up to me at the time, I thought, we just bought a barbecue pit, big old good one on wheels from Chris Marks's area down there in Missouri, near Burns, Kansas, actually, now I think about it. And so I thought, we got a barbecue pit, and we're in Chillicothe, and we're known for the gravel pits. So maybe we ought to call ourselves the Chili Pits. Well, friends actually gave me better guidance, and we ended up being the Smoking Ghost. So that's how the name and everything came about.
So I think it's fair to say that you win the award on the show for the most unique journey into barbecue to date. So that is absolutely a unique journey in and of itself. And so what year was this? Like, how long have you been competing?
Well, that's a different story. So we probably started doing the concession stand, ran that for maybe 8 years before we started doing, competing. I think it was 2016 or 17 when we did our first contest. I will never forget it, right? It's like your first girlfriend. You never forget your first contest. That was Lincoln, Illinois. There's things you learn And the first thing I will say is the first 5 contests we cooked were the maximum fun we've ever had ever barbecuing. So, I mean, we look back at those and they were a blast. Conversely, they were the lowest scores we've ever had. We learned several inalienable facts, which is that alcohol and barbecue scores are inverse. We also learned that barbecue pork butts don't bounce, and that turning in ribs that are hotter than mankind may not get you a good score. Those are the things right off the bat. I mean, we we didn't finish last, at all, but we certainly weren't in the upper half by any means.
I love that. That's a great point. I mean, yes, it's fun to hang out and sit around a smoker all night and have some beers with your buddies. I think it's more fun to hear your name called and win some hardware and win some money.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. And it's funny you mentioned that, and I'm laughing because that is precisely the mistake that we made when we first started competing, and couldn't agree with you more. There's absolutely an inverse relationship between alcohol and your scores. So that's pretty interesting. So you started competing, you said, if I remember correctly, in around 2017. And that's really, over the last, 7 years now, it seems like it's taken on a life of its own because you've expanded, right? Not just competing, you've also got your own lineup of various rubs and spices. When did all that come about?
Well, as we were getting long into the concession stand, and now we became the guys, and they didn't even look for the roles. That was going to be our role to do them. My wife got heavily involved as well, working on menu and margin on the menu. Like pretzels, taffy apple, just things that could demand a little more of the wallet and keep some of the money. We were trying to figure out, how do we make it taste better? How do we get a better taste on that, on the pork chops and that. So I started tinkering around with rubs and spices, thinking, well, it can't be that hard, right? Googling, and eventually I ended up at Lake Geneva Spice Company, because I wanted some sweet and some heat, and I wanted it kind of middle of the road, because I wanted to use it on the pork chops, I wanted to use it on corn, I wanted to use it on a few things, and I was getting heat or I was getting sweet, and I wasn't getting kind of the fine balance. And the gentleman at the Lake Geneva said, "Have you tried white pepper?" And I said, "Oh, that's great. I'll take some." He goes, "What kind?" I'm like, I don't know. So, $40 later and a whole bunch of white pepper. We came back, played some more, and then I learned another important lesson. I went ahead. I reached out to a couple of co-packers, and effectively, it was one that got back to me first, because it took me 3 tries of contacting, the co-packers. I think I tried Old World and Excalibur, and you know, I know I'm smaller than small compared to them in any way, but not even to get a return phone call. But eventually, Excalibur got back to me, and I took him my recipe. And the other thing I wasn't aware of is that I thought I was going to give them something, and I wanted them to get as close as they could to it. So I'd probably be in the 90% of what I gave them. Well, it actually was like 150% better than what I gave them. And that all comes from the fact that, all the ingredients they're using are top shelf, and they're just more fresh. And I naively tried to tell the guys, literally, these are all brand new rubs. And he goes, "And where'd you get it?" "Well, I got it that one at Sam's, Walmart, Geneva." He goes, "And when do you think they put them on their shelves? And when do you think it went into?" They explained the supply chain to me to explain that what I had was not fresh. Might be fresher than what I had, but it's not as fresh as they're getting, truckloads a day in these co-packers. So that was the one thing I didn't expect, is it to come back better than I gave them. And that was an eye opener, and it was like, wow moment. And that's kind of when, okay, we got something here.
So I love that because I know that there's, folks that listen to the show that have similar ambitions to get out there and, carve a niche out for themselves in the rub and spice world. And I think that your story is one that it's compelling, right? Because you literally said, well, I think we can do this. And you went out and did it. And you asked questions and probably made some mistakes, failed here and there. But I think that the moral of the story is that you just set your mind to it and you did it. And now you fast forward. And what's your rub lineup look like now? I mean, I'm guessing you started with one or two, but how has that expanded over time?
Well, the original rub came out as a steak and brisket. Um, again, no marketing research. Everybody was calling me and telling me, "Boy, it's great on corn. Great. Oh, have you tried it on seafood?" And this is how bad I was, right? I was correcting my customers and telling them, "You're using it on the wrong product." But think that one through, right? I mean, again, I was not a retail guy. I was an IT manager at Caterpillar, and then I was a statistics guy, and then a Six Sigma guy. So yeah, I was correcting customers, which is always a good thing to do. But eventually, I leaned into that, and with the National Barbecue Association, they just had their conference. I eventually submitted some of my products into there. The rub was the first thing, and I think in the very first year, 2018, it finished sixth. Which is not in the money. They're top five. But when I looked at, I don't know, the 120 that had submitted in the category, and I saw the names that were below number six, I was blown away, right? That's when I was like, wow, maybe this is bigger than me and my buddies and Chillicothe, right? And so that's when I really started taking a little more serious. The next year, we submitted it into the seafood category, and it won the seafood category, rub. And that's when we changed it from steak and brisket to all-purpose rub. And so the rub I have is an all-purpose. However, I have a couple projects underway. I have another rub that's in the works. I won't give too much away, other than it can be the mainstay for pork and ribs. Right now, my rub, if you're doing competition, my rub is in the wrap or on the back. It's not your mainstay for ribs. It's a great complement. It helps to give the breadth that you want to get in your turn in. But what I'm working on is one that would be right down the middle of the road for pork. I will do more research once I get it to where I want it to be and get feedback on what people are using it on. We'll spend some time on that as opposed to what I did before. But right now, so the rub is the all-purpose. I got one coming that's going to be more of a general purpose for, I'll call it pork, and probably chicken. We have the two sauces. We have the Haunted Heat and the Spooky Sweet. And those are, I acquired that company from a good friend, Eric, used to be under the name PittyQ. And we took it from one co-packer to another, and Eric and I worked on, moving that and the taste process, and it kind of surprised a bit of both of us again, that what you had could get better with a different co-packer. And the Haunted Heat, it's intriguing because it starts like a hot or really spicy, and then gets about halfway up, and then just kind of, just mellows out. It doesn't make it to your nostrils and your eye. So Haunted Heat is the one that's really kind of picked up sales a lot lately. The other one that's coming out, when I did go out with the sauces over the last 3 years, I actually used the internet and friends, and I crowdsourced the name and the colors for the label. And the Haunted Heat came up as the right answer. And Spooky Sweet was the other one. And thank gosh I listened to everybody, because the one I had kind of earmarked that I thought it would probably be, wasn't even the top 10. But we did end up with another name that I liked in a sauce category, and we got a product coming out under that. I'm going to assume before Halloween, but it's going to be called Ghost Fire. So that one will be the hot sauce. When people say, "Is it hot?" I'll have to say yes. So, but
Yes.
we're not done with it yet. There's some more work to do there.
So you said one very important thing in the midst of that. You said that you leaned into it, which is a phrase that I use pretty consistently, almost on a probably a daily, maybe a weekly basis. But I think I wanted to drive home this point, particularly for our listeners. At the end of the day, you have to be willing to take some risk, and you have to be willing to, as you said, lean into lean into the project, whether it's rubs, whether it's sauces, whether it's competition barbecue, you got to lean into it. And I also think too, probably to some capacity, be willing to fail, right? Because ultimately, if you're, in my opinion anyway, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. So I love that you said lean into it, because like I said, I use that phrase a lot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the early aw shucks moments was, I looked at, we have an expensive label. It's a foil label, and that was intentional. My strategy was you don't make the second sale until you make the first sale. So in order to make the first sale, when you're in the aisle, whether it's an Ace or whether it's a department store, a grocery store, or hardware store, and you back up and you look at all the rubs and you kind of blur yourself, can you pick one of them out? Which ones jump off the shelf visually, right? Doesn't mean it's good, but if it doesn't draw attention to your eye, then there's a good chance it's not going to draw attention to their hand to grab it. So that was kind of the goal, was to spend, a lot more money on the label initially and get that first buy. And it has won awards for the product label consistently. And again, this year with the National Barbecue, it got another award for the product label. But, everybody's telling me, you're paying too much for that label. And I go, yeah, I consider that marketing at the moment, right? It's not that I'm looking at total cost of ownership at the moment with that label. I'm still looking at that as marketing. But this is the learning lesson. They gave me a break if I bought 20,000 labels day one, right? Well, I did. And now, mind you, it was steak and brisket at the time when I had the rub. And then I changed the label. So I got this inventory of labels at a great price that I'm not going to use. So, don't focus on TCO. Have an eyeball for where you want to go, the total cost of ownership, that is, sorry. Have an eye for that. But, be very agile at the beginning, because there's going to be curves and turns, and you're going to make mistakes. The name, right? If I'd listened to my customer, done the marketing research, I might have called it an all-purpose rub. I don't know, but know that you're gonna go through things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, listening is a big deal. Not just to customers, but on your barbecue journey, I'm sure when you started competing, listening to other pit masters out there. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, and it has to do really with the competition barbecue landscape, right? The future, the long-term future of the sport that we all love, because there's no secret. I think it's safe to say that especially since 2020, the springtime of 2020, competition barbecue has really taken a hit nationally. I think that attendance is down, et cetera. But where I'm going with all this, I think, is helping to reestablish, right, as I would call it, or as I've been told, were the glory days of competition barbecue, which was when Pitmasters was airing. I think it was 2012, 13, 14, that time frame. A lot of teams, a lot of competition. There was a lot of exposure, and of course, with all of that comes marketing dollars. Comes sponsorships. I mean, at the end of the day, these companies, charcoal, rubs, you name it, they want to make sure they've got a big captive audience for their product. So I guess the future, right? The future of competition barbecue, in my mind, I think revolves around twofold, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. But one, I think it involves around us as teams providing more value to the event organizers. Whether it be increasing their ticket sales because people want to come in and engage with barbecue teams, whatever that may be. I think number one, we've got to provide more value there. And then secondly, I think that we have to make it a point, as much as I know some teams don't like to do this, but make it a point to engage with the public at these events. Again, I know that is an unpopular opinion, but one that I feel very passionate about, because I do care about the longevity of this industry, of the sport. So, in your mind, I want to hear from you. What needs to happen to make sure that we have, a viable, long-term, competitive barbecue industry that's growing and not just stagnant?
Well, Kurt, you hit on the highlights. I mean, I think the product that we call competition barbecue has to change a little bit, right? I think when you look at competition barbecue, it's made of organizers, it's made of judges, right? It's made of competition teams and the public, right? Now, organizers don't do this because they like to lose money. Their game plan is to use this as a vehicle, either in itself or in coupled with some other activity like a carnival affair, to make money, right? Now, with barbecue teams, usually people's choice is about the only way, or demonstrations or giveaways. That's the only way they're going to make money off us. It's sad to say this, but we're eye candy to the public, right?
Yep.
And you got people, to your point, are coming there and saying, "Hey, I've got this type of smoker. I was looking at another smoker. Wow, tell me more," right? Whether you're cooking on a pellet or a Jambo or an Outlaw, I mean, the public's there to learn in some degree, and some of them are going to be more forward than not. So to your point, being available to the public, even if it's to be cordial, answer a few questions, tell them, "Hey, if you want to come up here and chat while I'm doing this, that's fine. Look in here. I've just got to keep going. But no, come on in, stand on the deck, etc." Yeah, and I know there's a lot of teams saying, "Hey, I don't have time right now." That doesn't help us. But the other key thing is, from an event organizer, and we see this a lot, and I've talked to the board in the past on this, is that it's almost unfathomable that somebody comes to a competition, as a public member, and they can't get barbecue. They can't comprehend that, right? Get barbecue at a barbecue contest,
Right.
which is why we've got to find ways, and depending on where you live and the health departments, some are brutal, right? So, but we've chatted this over, and I know the board has this, and they're going to do some strategy. For example, KCBS, they got some strategy coming up here, I think in 2 days. What you can do is hand out a temporary membership at the door. So if the public wants to come in, give them, whatever, I'm not professing to know the numbers, give them 30-day access to KCBS material, right? Give them a temporary membership, that's on paper, but gives them, some sort of generic access. So there's some content, but more importantly now, they're members, right? And as a member, I could hand them a bone after the contest. I could hand them, chicken leg. I can hand them brisket, right? Because the same reason I can hand it to a judge without the health department weighing in, because we're a private society. We're not public sales. As soon as you do that, maybe that temporary membership is $3. KCBS makes some money, and then the event organizer charges 10. They make $7 or whatever, right? You play with the math. But the whole point is, this is a way to get an umbrella to get people in there. That's just one way, right? I think the other thing we've got to appeal, we all joked about King of the Cul-de-sac, or said more appropriately, Queen of the Kitchen or whatever, we've got to find a way to get like the flat toppers involved, maybe have maybe a rib burn, right? Maybe a double rib burn, maybe a triple, but do in the morning like a, flat top breakfast competition, open it up, right? You're limited to this size plate, right? And we're going to carve it up and hand it to 6 judges, whatever. And then you do your rib burn, and then you have a lunch, a smash burger, right? I don't know that anyone would be intimidated coming out to cook breakfast or intimidated doing a smash burger. But would somebody want to pull their small barbecue grill up and compete against me on a Jambo or Heath Riles on the Outlaw, cooking a whole? They probably aren't going to step up. So I can tackle those two, right? It's just. But when you're on a flat top for that, and now we got you in the game, right? Now you're going to start, just like the first contest I came to in Lincoln, I had some pro teams. Well, the team of the year 2010 was next to me, and one of the top 10 in the country is on the other side of me. First question they asked me is, how many meats are you cooking? They asked me if I'm in the right spot, and I said, I think so. And the next question was, how many meats are you cooking, right? I'm cooking 4. And they just looked at me and said, good luck. But what they were doing in their mind is, you look like a backyard team, even though I didn't even know what backyard was, but we need that incubator to get people engaged in barbecue again. Because just jumping in with as expensive it is isn't going to work, right? I mean, you can blame COVID, you can blame the economy, but I mean, I think all of them are working in the wrong direction at the moment, right? Our product is not as exciting. The economy is hurting us. Certainly COVID hurt us. If you listen to barbecue teams, the judging's a problem. You listen to judges, the cook team, I mean, everybody has their isms about what's wrong, right? And I'm not saying anyone's right or anyone's wrong. I'm just saying that, it's always a perfect storm going on in the process of improving the product. But we can't wait for a pit masters. You can't wait for something to disrupt you, because guess what? It can disrupt you both ways, for the better and for the right. If you look at KCBS, the biggest disruptor is SCA, right? And they're thriving, right? And what's wrong with that model? I'm going to go cook a steak. I don't have to bring any meat. I spend, 100 to 150 on my get there. Mind you, I got gas and all that. I'm not saying they saw the economy and they came up with a plan that worked for the economy, but that recipe is working for them. So, I mean, in my mind, you look at any business, any product, right? And you look what's working. You don't have to mimic it, but you got to understand why it's working, right?
It's working.
And start to blend it into your product. I love the idea of doing turkey, right? I love that. I'm not a big fan of the KSBS steak program. Good friends with the guy that came up with it, but we were a day late, $1 short, and it wasn't differentiated. Well, they tried to differentiate it, but it was so differentiated that, it kind of, I believe, missed the mark.
You brought up a lot of great points there. One of the best ones I think that I heard was, talking about mimicking what is working for other, businesses in the similar industry. And I think you're dead on the money. I think the SCA saw a need and filled it. And, it's a much, much lower cost of entry. The time, heck, you could do 3 steak cook-offs in a day, if you wanted to, fairly easily. I also think, too, the fact that they supply the meat, I think that evens the playing field. And this is something that I've talked about on several episodes, and that is, you think about, backyard teams not wanting to go pro because of the cost of brisket, which I understand, but it almost makes you wonder, well, what if the organizers on the KCBS side would start providing the meat? That certainly would even the playing field so that, that barrier of entry may be much lower for a team that wants to come in and cook, brisket and all 4 categories. Obviously, like a lot of things in life, it comes down to money. However, the way I look at it is that the organizers could simply pass that cost along, just like the organizers do for the SCA. Selfishly, I wish there was more SCA in our area. We've cooked 1 and we had a blast and got 3rd. and I think that was the one time that your theory of alcohol and barbecue scores was incorrect, because in that case, it was they had what's the word? It's not inverse, but whatever the reverse of that is, because we had plenty of liquid courage. And frankly, I have no idea how we placed 3rd, but we did.
Linear relationship. It was a strong linear
there
relationship.
It is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. That's the word I'm looking for. But yeah, I think you're dead on the money. I think that we have to seriously take a look at, okay, what are other businesses doing? Don't have to mimic it, but why? I think the why behind it is so important. And I love that you brought that up. Again, for our listeners, we're chatting with Paul Buob, SmokinGhost BBQ out of Chillicothe, Illinois. Make sure you check him out at SmokinGhost BBQ. Remember, just 1 G, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Now, where can folks buy your Spooky Sweet Haunted Heat, I think is what it was, and the all-purpose? Where can they buy that?
Well, I mean, I do have a store locator on the website, so you can find how close it is in brick and mortar. And I don't know, we're several hundred stores coast to coast. So we've made that journey. Online, you should be able to find it at all the major barbecue stores in America. Atlanta Barbecue, the Barbecue Superstore, Kansas City Barbecue, KC Grilling, Proud Souls, the 301 Boys, Barbecue Pro Shop. So, I've got a really good relationship with all of those, which is why I got to kind of move. When I order for supplies, I got to have a little revolving door as to who I'm ordering from, so that I don't have favoritism in ordering too much from one. But that's where they can get it.
And final question as we wind down here, and it has to do really around words of wisdom, right? So for the listeners that are taking all this in and wanting to get into competition barbecue, what words of wisdom would you share with them?
Well, the first thing I have is, hang or get to know teams that are doing well by your standard, right? They don't have to be grand champions, but if they're doing well in a category that you are struggling with and you can become friends, don't be afraid to ask, right? They may not hand you their sheet and say, here's what I do. But don't be afraid to ask, because you're going to be as good as the people you surround yourself with. And like my summer where I kind of stalled a bit, I had Triple H, I had Janky Leg, I had the Barbecue Bus. I had, the top 5 in the world I could lean on, and Paul, it's in your head, or Paul, you're overthinking it, or whatever, you get those real coaching lessons, and they know you enough that and you respect it. So again, get yourself an audience that you can chat with and sample food. Everybody says it, take a judging class to understand what judges are thinking. But then, Rooters and Tutors and I were next to each other in Collierville. We'd never exchanged. We've been next to each other before. Let's just exchange. And I was like, wow, I like that chicken. It was just amazing, the compliment. I thought I had big chicken leg. He had a big chicken leg. I'm like, well, how do you know? So we started chatting that. So that's one thing. The second thing is come up with a plan, but don't get so tight to the plan that you panic or get frustrated. It says stay at 255 for 20 minutes. It's running at 260. You don't change, right? Right. There are some things you need to panic on. If it's at 100, it's supposed to be 250. But a little bit of a degree off or two, or a few minutes off your timeline, who cares, right? I think that's the other thing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of any other great words of wisdom. Take notes. I got a book that I write everything down on, and I went back and say, well, let's start looking. What time did it go off? What time is it wrapping? Did this go long? Or, and again, not everybody says, well, I cooked the exact same way. You didn't cook the same meat. You're right. Each pig, each cow is different. There's no way you're going to get exactly the same, but it should be similar. But if you have a log book and when it came on, when it came off, and technology, like the Fireboard, that's a history, So when I went after the first quarter, I sat and downloaded all the good results, not all of them. I downloaded the good results and I put it into a spreadsheet and I built a chart and I built a control chart. And it said of all the championships or top 3 of pork, of brisket, these are what happened during that time. So it's kind of, for me, I should be in this window. And that window is it's like 10 degrees, 10 minutes. It wasn't tight, but it was big enough to know, don't panic, right? Just stay calm, ride through it. And I think teams early on, I think they read the script too tight and stay to the script and get frustrated. And then, if you blew a category, maybe the chicken's tight, you turn it in, it's tight. Don't let that cause the other 3 categories to go to hell, right?
Right.
Okay, maybe you're not going to win chicken, maybe it's not going to get a call. But if you take this attitude in the ribs, you're going to get no call in ribs. you have to write it off. Once it's done and you got your notes, just move on. It's a new game, right? That's the one thing. It took me a while because I would get mad, at myself, on the timeline, and it would affect others. So, you can always you can always improve your turn in up until the point you set it down. So
That is a powerful, powerful way to end the show. And Paul, we appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a great discussion, and look forward to seeing you at Sip and Swine here in a few weeks.
yeah, I'm looking forward. I'll be coming from North Carolina, so it'll be a short drive this year to Sip and Swine.
Much shorter.
Yes.